you're known as kind of the T-Rex dude, in my opinion. Like that's sort of how I know you. I would love to hear a couple things. One of the things I would like to hear is if you could explain the Nanotyrannus controversy to me.
Sure.
Because I do kind of understand it, but also like I don't kind of understand it. And, you know, when we talked to Jack Horner, we had talked about dinosaur ontogeny. And, you know, so I think he kind of posits, right, that it's a juvenile T-Rex.
Yeah, and not all things are answered by ontogeny. For instance, a friend, a really famous paleontologist, Dr. Robert Bacher, says he'd really like to have a symposium titled Ontogenetic Series, Real and Imagined. Because sometimes people group things together that don't belong together. And so Nanotyrannus is one of those things. And I can show you over here, I've got a little exhibit that we put up.
And what you're kind of talking about there is like the lumpers and splitters kind of thing. Is that what it is?
Sort of, but so it has become in vogue with Jack and with Tom Carr, especially with Nanotyrannus, that he had a nice hypothesis, and it was a valid hypothesis. It was an idea that Nanotyrannus lancensis, and this is the type specimen, a cast of the type specimen, and as you can see, it's a pretty good skull, but there's some things about it that are missing. That's the dark color there.
Okay.
And so he said, well, what if that was a juvenile T-Rex? And it was a perfectly good hypothesis. But
sure,
when you make a hypothesis in science, you try to disprove it, not try to prove what you said. So if you can't disprove it, then it's true. Then it's probably true. But so I looked at that question, and then shortly after he made that, let's say this is 1999, I think he published the paper. In 2001, I helped collect this specimen. This is the skull that the brain case is made, but most in the back, the surrangular of the lower jaw is made, but the rest of that is pretty much all that specimen. And one of the things that became clear is whatever Nanotyrannus was, this was the same thing. And one of the characters is, you see that hole in the back of, that's called the quadratojugal. There's a little, that little, not the big hole in the lower jaw, but above that, right above where the articulation is, there's a little hole there.
Yeah.
And that's a pneumatic foramen. Nanotyrannus is the only dinosaur that has a pneumatic foramen in its quadratojugal, which means it's something very unusual. So pneumatic. Can you
say that sentence again? In his quadratojugal? What was that?
That bone is called the quadratojugal.
Okay.
It touches both the quadrate and the jugal. Okay. So the jugal is a cheekbone. Quadrate is that bone that forms a ball on the skull for the ball and socket joint of the lower jaw.
Gotcha. Okay.
Anyway, but maybe more visual than that is the difference in the number of teeth and the morphology of the teeth. So if you look at this case over here, this is a juvenile Tyrannosaurus rex jaw, a dentary. It has, the tooth row length is almost identical to Jane. Here's Jane's tooth, lower jaw, the dentary, and you can see the number of teeth there. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 alveoli. That's where the teeth go in, 17 holes for teeth.
Okay.
T-Rex has 12 or 13.
Oh, so it's like it's kind of like...
It's got at least 3 more teeth in its lower jaw. Now, Tom said, well, through ontogeny, Tyrannosaurus rex loses 3 teeth out of the lower jaw and a bunch out of the upper jaw too.
Okay.
But the problem is no living animal today does that. In the fossil record, if you have a false ontogenetic series, you might see it, like he was proposing here. But if that is true, T-Rex is the only animal that loses tooth positions. Now, so this has only 12 teeth. And that's a juvenile T-Rex. Notice the size of the teeth, how big and how massive they are. They're also more circular in cross-section. Nanotyrannus teeth are compressed. Nanotyrannus teeth have a much smaller serrations. In other words, per inch, they have more serrations than T-Rex does in any stage in life. And if we look at a very close relative, Tyrannosaurus bataar, or also called Tarbosaurus bataar, this is a juvenile Tarbosaurus skeleton here. It has, so this is even smaller. So Tarbosaurus gets to be almost the size of T-Rex. This juvenile is even smaller than that Nanotyrannus skull.
Huh.
It has exactly the same number of teeth as it does in the adult.
Oh.
There's also the first maxillary tooth. The first tooth next, so the premaxilla here has, these are our incisors. Our canine is between the maxilla and the premaxilla. On Nanotyrannus and on Gorgosaurus and on Alioramus, we have those dinosaurs have what's called an incisiform first maxillary tooth, which means it looks just like the premaxillary teeth, which are very different than the maxillary teeth. And so there's a whole mess of differences. There's something like 40 some different characters in the skull that are different for Nanotyrannus than they are from Tyrannosaurus rex. Any other dinosaur, if you had that many differences, and nobody would question that it's not something different.
But because people are so attached to a T-Rex.
People are attached to T-Rex, and Thomas Carr has defended it. He's very eloquent in his defenses, but still, he just unfortunately has not been able to admit that he's wrong. Now, the dueling dinosaurs have a beautiful, complete, absolutely complete, except for one claw, of a skeleton of Nanotyrannus. And we see some other differences that we couldn't necessarily see from Jane because we didn't have a good neck. A Tyrannosaurus rex like Stan, the neck, or the skull, is 1.5 times longer than the neck. On Nanotyrannus, the neck is actually longer than the skull. So it's the ratio and proportion of 1.5 for Tyrannosaurus rex and 0.9 for Nanotyrannus. That's a morphological change that doesn't make a whole lot of sense in going from a 2-foot skull to a 4-foot skull.
The way that I'm understanding it based on what you're telling me is I'm kind of comparing it to the diagnostic feature of 2 types of catfish. You count the anal rays on a catfish, and that's what separates, like you can tell, like 2 species that are very similar, like a channel cat and a small blue cat, right? And if you count the anal rays on the fin, it seems like a pretty trivial difference, except that it's like crazy diagnostic. And so you're kind of saying that in addition to, and it's funny when you were talking about like the only creature that like loses teeth at
positions, yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, but my wisdom teeth, I was like, oh no, I took those out on purpose.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the anal fins, and man, you really can see the difference in these teeth. At least like these to me are more like a fine like steak knife. It's like, and these to me are like, you're like butcher knife.
Yeah.
It's like a heavier, hardier thing. It seems like it's like kind of meant for whatever. And
yeah, those are fillet and butcher. Yep.
Yeah.
So the real killer though is over the past, so since 2006, we found a number of specimens where we have more hand bones. The first hand of Tyrannosaurus rex was found in 1990. Both Sioux and Museum of the Rockies specimen MOR 555 had a hand. Well, now we have a number of other ones that have hands or partial hands, and it turns out that even though the biggest Nanotyrannus skull we have is about 2 feet long, the biggest T-Rex skull we have is 4.5 feet long. If we take that information and we look at the hands and all the hand bones, every single hand bone from Nanotyrannus is bigger than every single hand bone from T-Rex. That means that the only way to grow, to make, so this is a Nanotyrannus hand here, and here's these are the 2 biggest hands we have for T-Rex, and there's a smaller hand. But every single bone in the hand of Nanotyrannus, including their claws, is bigger than every single hand bone we have for T-Rex, which means in order to take a Nanotyrannus and grow up to T-Rex, you'd have to literally shrink their hands a lot and then grow them again. partially. You'd never get to the same size. No animal does that either.
And it would be like, and if that is a juvenile, like T-Rex, that'd be like a little kid walking around with like Dikembe Mutombo sized, like Shaquille O'Neal hands.
Yeah.
Huh.
But Shaquille O'Neal hands on a little kid, like you said, instead of, and then as Shaquille O'Neal grew up, his hands grew smaller and then grew a little bit again.
Yeah, it's not like when you have like a teenager where it's like they grow into their feet. Mm-hmm. It's like no, he shrunk into his feet shrunk into his body.
So what that does, those the morphological differences in the skull and body, the difference in the neck proportions to the skull, the difference in the tooth numbers, the difference in the tooth morphology, and the hands show that falsifies that hypothesis that Nanotyrannus is a juvenile Tyrannosaurus rex. And anybody who's an anatomist would agree with that.
Yeah, you just feel like it's crazy diagnostic.
It's crazy diagnostic, and maintaining that false hypothesis now, it's falsified, is detrimental to our science.
Yeah, you're just not into that.
And so I'm okay with, I mean, if it would have been my theory, I'd have been just fine with it, or my hypothesis, it would have been just fine with it being falsified, because that, as a scientist, we want to know the answer. We should not have a vested interest in what that answer is. Maybe it was my idea that Nanotyrannus was a juvenile T-Rex. Well, that's too bad. I had, and I've had ideas that have also been falsified. I thought that we could tell the sex based upon, and this is based upon the work of Romer, that the chevrons, which are those little spines at the base of the tail, he published that they were different in male and female crocodiles. And I thought, well, if we find enough specimens, we might be able to show that for Tyrannosaurus rex.
Oh, sure.
Well, it turns out in alligators, that's not true. Oh. And a colleague of mine, Greg Erickson, said, and I published a number of papers saying, giving that hypothesis. And he said, a student of mine did a bunch of measuring and a bunch of counting of chevrons, and it's completely random. They have, that one extra one could be a male or a female. And I said, well, that's really cool. Now we know the answer. And so he asked me on to put my name on the paper as well, and it is, and the title of the paper is Androgynous Rex.
I like that. That's
funny. And it was great because we had the answer to it. It was an idea. It was a good idea, but it's falsified.
It seems like I should know this, and I can already hear like the YouTube comments going, "You were talking to Peter Larson and you didn't even know." I get that all the time. We did a Bigfoot expert. People were very mad that I was not a Bigfoot expert talking to a Bigfoot expert.
Why would you you can't know everything.
Trust me, I'm not even close. The Nanotyrannus, is this something that was kind of brought to the scientific realm by you, or? No,
that was Thomas Carr. So I'm saying if it would have been me, I'd have been happy to know the answer. And I've been arm waving for years about this, and now there's been a couple of papers that have come out saying, it is not a juvenile T-Rex. It absolutely cannot be.
Who was okay, sorry, I'm asking this in a bad way. Who is the person that proposed like the new species? Like this is a Nanotyrannus.
Dr. Robert Bakker. Well, the first description of this skull
come over here.
was made in 1946. And then in 1985, they then described it as a new genus, Nanotyrannus lancensis. It was put into Gorgosaurus lancensis because it has many affinities. It looks very much like Gorgosaurus. The number of teeth are more aligned with Gorgosaurus. Mm-hmm. That canine, an incisiform first maxillary tooth, is like Gorgosaurus and like Alioramus. And but it was really Bakker. It's really Bakker.
Okay, gotcha.
And interestingly enough, Bob Bakker, you might be familiar with him from the Dinosaur Heresies. It was a book that was put out in 1985. But he's one of the first guys who said dinosaurs have feathers. He's the first guy who ever drew a dinosaur with feathers. And he's had all kinds of weird ideas in his book, which just about all of them have proven to be true, which is pretty cool.
That is super cool, man.
He's really the dinosaur renaissance. He and John Ostrom, and which was one of his professors. But Dr. Bob made it very public, and he's a really excellent speaker and stuff. And so he's kind of like the Carl Sagan of paleontology.
Sure. Okay.
And anyway, so he's the guy who really said that. And then so, looking at his work and looking at new things because of new specimens that have been found, it's very clear.
Hey everybody, thank you for watching this bonus clip. For more of this kind of thing, make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps us out. If you want to see the episode where we got this clip from, you can see it right up there. And if you want to see more podcasts, playlist right there. Check them out. Super good. I like that. This really was a good episode.